Welcome in. So we know what the president says about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip, but what about the legislative branch of our government? Congress, the next stop by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We're ready to bring it to you when he steps in front of a very important podium. And video to our monitors shows the northeastern portion of our nation on ice. Look at that. Slick, slow and go conditions. Our cameras are fired up in your neighborhoods. Plus, coffee, achy, so stuffed up, fever so you can't rest. Yep. We hear you talking. We're going to be discussing the nationwide flu outbreak. Plus, say it isn't so. Sesame Street dragged into the federal funding discussion. The big deal over Big Bird. You're watching CBS News 24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. Let's go. Happening right now, President Donald Trump needs money to realize his plans and his promises. We know this. Congress writes the check. So that is why he is right now with Republican lawmakers hammering out that much talked about congressional budget. And the top of his list, boosting border security. And by the way, there's a ticking clock to talk about here before a government shutdown. Keep in mind, March 14th is the government funding deadline. So let's go live to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand at the White House. Natalie, that March deadline really means it's go time for Team Trump.
Yeah, that's right, Reed, and that's why he's huddling behind closed doors with Republican lawmakers as they try to hash out the way forward. We know, that they've been trying to discuss and debate the size, scope, details of legislation that will include the president's priorities when it comes to government spending, taxes, and of course, border security. And as you know, Reed, there's been a lot of talk on Capitol Hill whether to move forward with one big bill, which the president initially suggested that would be his preference. But since then, he's not been as vocal as Republican leaders try to hash out the way forward, some signaling that breaking it into two bills might be more beneficial. But interesting to note, Reed, that on border security and immigration, you may have had some support from, say, moderate Democrats who maybe would cross party lines. But given the activities over the past week, all of the, efforts by the Trump administration and Elon Musk to try and shrink government, the USAID activities and this buyout offer, this has alienated a lot of those Democrats.
Well, and of course, we're seeing that these executive orders have had a trend now of spurring some conversations in courtrooms. Walk us through what the Trump administration is looking at by way of court challenges on this day.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, well, the birthright citizenship executive order, that is in a Seattle courtroom this hour, as well as a challenge filed by unions representing employees of the federal government who are pushing back against this buyout offer presented by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE. That deadline is coming up at midnight tonight for federal workers to decide if they want to take it or not. So we'll have to wait and see whether a Boston judge rules potentially on whether to block it as early as this afternoon.
Well, and the big question is, what happens to those federal workers who just say, no way, I'm not going to take the buyout? What are they facing? What's the reality?
Yeah, well, I spoke to one of the unions that represents around 800,000 federal employees in this region, and she said that she's telling her members to look really long and hard at this proposal, consult a personal attorney. They have a lot of questions about this. They're worried about whether or not the administration will hold up its end of the bargain, saying that they will, pay these employees through the end of September. Take a listen to some of her concerns.
There's no question that there will be legal challenges, in part because there's a question about the authority of Musk and President Trump to make the offer they made. And then there's questions about whether or not they'll ultimately be fulfilling the promises that are in the offer.
That was Jackie Simon of the American Federation of Government Employees. So again, 2 million government employees weighing this offer. CBS News has learned that at least or more than 40,000 have accepted so far.
All right, Natalie Brand reporting live from a very chilly White House lawn. You stay warm. Go warm up your hands, my friend. Thank you so much for streaming with us today. Well, first with the president, next with members of Congress. We're talking about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's very busy schedule. Right now, he's headed for a face-to-face sit-down with top House Republican Speaker Mike Johnson. The big talking point, the president's thoughts about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip potentially, including whether U.S. troops would be boots on the ground to make that plan happen. Here's an exchange. We wanted to let you hear it.
Mr. Netanyahu, do you think troops are needed in Gaza?
Are we in?
To make President Trump's plan feasible?
No.
So asking about, do you think it's feasible that U.S. boots would be on the ground? He said a very clear no. But let's go live to CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. Torian, Congress has the power of the purse. Johnson has great power where writing checks are concerned. So really, what's Netanyahu's end game with Congress?
Yeah, Reed, interesting enough, and I looked down to check recent notes that we got, readouts of that hearing. Democrats coming out of that meeting with Netanyahu said that they didn't actually discuss in detail Trump's proposal for a Gaza takeover by the U.S., nor did they say that there would be a feasible consensus around sending troops to the ground to help see that plan through. We just heard Netanyahu say there that succinctly, no troops would be needed in order for this plan to happen. What I'm imagining happen, though, as Netanyahu makes his rounds around Capitol Hill, he's looking to encourage lawmakers to continue with allyship through support, especially as the government looks through this drastic reformation. We see USAID at the center of a lot of controversy around here as Elon Musk looks to make slashes through the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. He wants to reaffirm that the U.S. has Israel's back and further aid won't be in jeopardy like we're seeing across the board.
Well, we also know that the president, who's taking cues from Elon Musk, is going into these meetings knowing about those line item issues as he meets with lawmakers who he needs, again, to write the checks. What could this meeting reveal about Mr. Trump's top priorities?
Well, the big budget reconciliation is top of mind for President Trump and lawmakers. Speaker Johnson, before he headed to the White House, although he's on his way back now to meet with Netanyahu, said that he wants one bill, as the president previously called it, one big beautiful bill, but he's hoping to start there with one bill for reconciliation to get a lot of the priorities out of the way. On the Senate side, though, there doesn't seem to be the same train of thought. Senator Tom Tillis said that he's looking at a couple of ways to get this through. He said the House can do its thing. The Senate, though, is looking to probably get forth a smaller bill first that would include measures to secure funding for President Trump's U.S.-Mexico southern border, but then also wants to look at those other priorities through how they could approach spending that way, too. So it's incongruent there, Reed.
Right.
You have the House looking at just one measure. You have the Senate looking at another. Ultimately, they'll have to meet in the middle for this budget reconciliation process to happen effectively.
Well, and you mentioned government reformation. We have to keep in mind that the government is still forming, informed by those confirmation hearings. You've got an update on some of those Senate confirmations. What's going on there?
Yeah, so Trump's pick for his next budget chief, Russell Vought, is already clear through committee. The Republicans passed a procedural vote to get him to the floor, but Democrats are utilizing a procedure that allows them to debate up to 30 hours. From when it started to when it will end, that means he could see a full vote on the floor by around 7 p.m. tonight. I haven't seen any significant pushback from Republicans, so seeing that there probably won't be 4 defectors, he's all but guaranteed to be the next budget chief for the president. Kash Patel is one that we're watching. We know that Senator Grassley, who's the head of the Senate Intel Committee, has postponed his vote out of committee. We were watching to see what some of those on-the-fence Republicans will do with this. That will determine where it goes, but it looks like he has the support there as well. What the timing looks like for a floor vote is to be seen, but if he is voted out of committee next week, we could see that happen, a floor vote by the end of the week at some time as well.
All right, 24 hours to go, and then your week is mailed in. Torian Small, thank you so much for keeping us updated every minute of this week. So we want to show our viewers at home right now this. Look at this winter storm. This is video to our monitors. over here, right? It shows you this is South Salem, New York. So if you're among the 90 million in the Northeast streaming us today, this is a big dose of what you're dealing with. Looks pretty, right? But it's kind of a soup and cornbread sort of a day. And then look at this. This is what tens of thousands of you woke up to in central Pennsylvania. Freezing rain, a lot of streets coated with ice, and a lot of sidewalks as well. So let's get up the road to Maryland's Carroll County and CBS News Baltimore reporter Casey Baylor. Casey, I understand that you're throwing some salt there on the sidewalks. What's it looking like, friend?
Yeah, just a little chilly out here, I can't lie, but I will say we're starting to see things get a little bit cooler and see things melt off as well. I have this branch here because I want to show you. Earlier this morning, this thing was completely covered in ice. It was like an ice cast, but you can see right now just a little bit of ice we're seeing on this branch. You're starting to see a lot of things in this area melt. I also want to show you the grass here because this is really a better picture of the ice that we're experiencing. So you can see this ice cast all on the ground here, and it's a quick little kick, and you can kind of see the icicles fall off there, but you can also notice that this grass is wet. Another sign to tell you that things are melting in this area. Throughout the morning, we were looking at light poles, guardrails, sidewalks. They all had a sheet of ice. I definitely slipped a couple of times throughout the morning as well. But again, we're starting to see conditions kind of warm up a little bit, but still, because we're still experiencing that chill, we're still going to see a little bit of ice in areas in terms of, plants and trees and poles of that nature, Reed.
All right, Casey, you're making me hungry for hot potato soup, add the bacon, extra cheese, and chives. You go get indoors. Safe travels to everybody out there. Zoe, when I see cold weather, I just think food, right? Ooh. Comfort food.
Oh, definitely. And the biggest thing that she didn't mention were bridges. Bridges ice a lot quicker than regular roadways. So just kind of take your travel easy. Maybe stay indoors, eat some really good warm food, and just enjoy a little bit of fresh snow on the ground. Maybe if you saw some, it kind of depends on where you were, though. That snow and ice storm is wrapping up, though, so that's the good news. Picking up the pieces, hopefully cleaning up a little bit, because I'm sure there were some downed tree limbs with the ice accumulation. The ice storm is still technically in effect, but again, it's not going to last much longer. The most of the snow is currently making its way across the northeastern parts of the United States. It's currently impacting places like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and northern New York. But then you notice these areas directly under my feet in yellow and green. That's on the southern edge of the system, the warm edge of the system, where they're dealing with the potential for severe weather this afternoon. Large hail, damaging wind gusts, and maybe even an isolated spin-up tornado as the snow moves off and away from us. So let's break down the timing of this upcoming system, because again, it is very quickly making its way farther and farther away from the East Coast. Places like Pennsylvania and southern New York already seeing the end of the snow. The snow will continue to traverse across Maine, like I said, New Hampshire and Vermont throughout this afternoon, but it's this line of severe weather setting up across parts of Tennessee and Kentucky and then heading over to the Appalachian Mountains. This is going to be our biggest concern when it comes to severe weather through this evening. Do be aware of that. Again, damaging wind gusts and large hail are the biggest concern, but you can't rule out an isolated tornado, something that we're going to continue to keep a very close eye on. But you notice it's a quick mover. It will already be out of our hair, Read, by later tonight, but we're already tracking our next storm system. It's going to bring even more snow across the Midwest and Northeast into this weekend.
All right, got to help each other out there.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Well, we're also seeing if it's icy on Sesame Street. Still ahead on CBS News 24/7, why Big Bird and Moroccan pottery have turned into a political flashpoint by a committee watching the dollars, your dollars. A heated debate when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Federal workers offered a government buyout face a deadline today. So today is the last day to take that deal. Nearly 10,000 U.S. and USAID employees are set to be on leave. Many protested in D.C. last night before our cameras. Many of them say that this will cause people to die without help from critical humanitarian aid that USAID provides. So let's drill down on this, because you're going to be hearing a lot about USAID in the weeks to come. It's not been without criticism from both sides of the aisle. So let's break it down with Olivia Rinaldi. Let's get really granular, because we know that DOGE is getting really granular. What are some of the policy positions? What are some of the directions the money has flowed that has really caused some people on both sides of the aisle to be in question?
Yeah, Reed, a lot of questions about how USAID actually spends their money. Our Confirmed team went through and looked at line by line where some of this money gets spent. And let me just read through some of these reports that we have found. There was a claim from the Trump administration that about $2 million was spent in USAID funds for a Moroccan pottery class. That is true. In 2009, USAID allotted about $27 million for an economic development project in Morocco. Now, pottery is an economic engine there, and their tile industry is world-renowned. A lot of tourists go there and make pottery. That's something that happens. But the question remains of why U.S. taxpayer dollars are being used to fund a program like this that was later found to be, quote, ineffective. There was also a claim that $20 million was spent on a Sesame Street show created for Iraq. This is also true. USAID used about $20 million of partner funding to work with the Sesame Street Workshop to produce a program that would promote inclusion, mutual respect, and understanding across ethnic, religious, and sectarian groups. That is a quote from their website. And this project was supposed to run from 2021 to 2027. Another claim that our team had fact-checked and looked at was that there was a $70,000 DEI musical that was being produced in Ireland. Also true. The Department of State, as a part of a public diplomacy program, awarded about $70,000 in 2022 for a live musical event that would promote the U.S. and Irish shared values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is all a part of government records. And just finally, another one that I want to read to you that we found as a part of our look at this line-by-line item was another eye-popping figure, about $9 million of funds that were supposed to be used for food and medical supplies for Syrian civilians actually ended up in the hands of a terrorist. This is someone who was using these funds, diverting them to terrorist organizations, including one that's affiliated with Al-Qaeda. So there are a lot of questions surrounding USAID, and of course they do good work when it comes to vaccines. People I've talked to who were even critical about the way some of these funds were spent say that their work on PEPFAR to combat HIV, AIDS in countries all across the world is significant and has actual tangible results. But when you look line by line at some of how these $40 billion of funds allocated by Congress are actually spent, there's a lot in here leaving a lot of questions to a lot of people.
Right, and a lot of people wanting to trace the votes of who greenlit some of these things that spends U.S. taxpayer dollars. It really punctuates what President Trump said about the America First agenda. While we're talking about the president, I have to ask you about something that he said on Truth Social today. He's accusing USAID of illegally paying Politico and other outlets as a payoff for creating good stories about Democrats. Any truth to those claims?
Yeah, let's break that down a little bit. So what he's talking about there is some funds that get used by the federal government, different federal agencies, to pay for Politico Pro. Now, Politico Pro is used in public sector and private sector. And what it is it's fact-based reporting, real-time intelligence. Think of it like a tracking tool. It's almost like a research tool that a lot of people in federal government use because it provides minute-by-minute updates of really granular things that are happening across government. So we know that USAID spent about $20,000 in the 2023 fiscal year for Politico Pro. There was also a figure that we can confirm that about $8 million of federal funding is spent in Politico products. That's across the federal government. That's all aspects of it. And I should point out, members of Congress also use Politico Pro. They use it to keep updates of what's going on, even on Congress. As we know, there's a lot happening there all the time, and not every office can keep up with it. I do want to read a statement from Politico Pro where they said that Politico has never been, quote, a beneficiary of government programs or subsidies, not 1 cent ever in 18 years. Really, not in agreement with what Trump said about the illegality of Politico. They're saying that this is a product that actually works and people in federal government use it because it provides such factual and recent and up-to-date information.
Well, regardless, it's an important discussion because we're talking about American taxpayer dollars, and that's why I love the CBS News Confirmed team drilling down, fact-checking, and offering it in a very fair and unbiased way. We appreciate you so much, and if you're like me, you'll follow CBS News Confirmed right there in the palm of your hand on social media. It is invaluable. So when we see it, you see it on CBS News 24/7. And look at this. This is video to our monitors from the Department of Defense. It shows the first flight of undocumented immigrants arriving at Guantanamo Bay. The DOD said that the people on this flight were high-threat criminals who brought violence and mayhem to communities. Now, ICE is also cracking down on undocumented immigrants already in the United States. In fact, look at this. Yesterday, ICE conducted an enforcement operation in the Denver area. That includes this raid at an apartment complex caught on camera. The Denver branch of the agency posted this video online to explain why. Let's listen in.
Unfortunately, we have to come to the communities because we don't get the cooperation that we need from the jails. It would be so much easier and so much safer for our officers and agents if we could take these people into custody from a safe environment. But if we have to come out in the community to do this, that's what we're going to do.
They are resolute. Well, days after President Donald Trump leveled tariffs against Mexico, a Trump turnaround, Mexico conceded and they agreed to send troops to the border. And video to our monitors, there you see it. Shows the Mexican National Guard and Army truck at the border. This is the border separating Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. They are told that they are among the first of 10,000 troops that Mexico will send to its northern border. We've also seen patrols near Tijuana, Mexico, at the California border, but we'll continue watching it. Well, do you give a hallelujah to this? Likely you, like me, know this story. Cold and flu medicine in high demand right now. That's because human flu cases are on the rise across the country. Are you feeling it? CBS News national correspondent Michael George takes a closer look at how that virus is affecting schools and what you need to do to stay safe.
Flu cases continue to spread around the country. Elizabeth McGuire's 7th grader is one of them.
I could see the waiting room was completely full when I went in there.
Earlier this week, Bullitt County, Kentucky schools had such a high number of student and staff illnesses, they closed for 3 days so crews could sanitize and deep clean the buildings.
I thought it was a great call on their end. All we can do is keep kids from getting sick, is to definitely keep their hands clean, and when they're sick, they need to stay away, stay at home.
At least 41 states are reporting high or very high levels of flu, and ER visits for the virus have increased nearly 30% compared to the week before. 250,000 hospitalizations are reported to date, and more than 11,000 deaths.
These cases are staggering, but they're not unlike numbers we saw pre-pandemic. We got a little bit spoiled after the pandemic because of precautions that people were taking, and what that resulted in is a little bit of an immunity gap, where society as a whole is less immune. We have slightly lower vaccination rates, and so our defenses are slightly down.
Dr. Rabia De La Torre with NYU Langone Health reminds us that antiviral medications are available, which when given within 1 to 2 days of symptoms can shorten the duration of illness.
We tend to recommend it for people who are high risk. Immunocompromised, very young children, pregnant women, people who have severe comorbidities like heart disease or diabetes.
And even in February, doctors say as long as the flu virus is circulating, anyone who's eligible should get vaccinated if they haven't already. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
2 Tylenol and call you in the morning. Okay, so from human flu to reports of bird flu. Why is bird flu allegedly showing up in a Nevada dairy herd when we come back? All right, when we see it, you see it. Breaking news on 24/7, as promised, as always. 2 new developments and 2 lawsuits against the Trump administration. So first, let's break this down. Birthright citizenship. A second judge now calls that executive order regarding birthright citizenship unconstitutional. Second, another judge has blocked a Trump plan offering incentives for federal workers to resign. So a lot to break down here. Legal analyst and trial attorney Robin Nunn joins us live. So Robin, let's first start with the federal workers resignation portion, because today is that important deadline. So what now happens to those federal workers who woke up this morning and said, hey, I have a deadline today to make a decision?
Yeah, it seems as if the judges actually blocked the government's efforts to make a decision and this deadline for today, and has asked for more time to consider their issue more. So hopefully federal workers will get some sort of communication from the government letting them know that the deadline has been extended.
Okay, so now let's go back to the birthright citizenship conversation, because we know days ago that Seattle judge really put a foot in the door and said, no, this is unconstitutional. Now we have word of a second judge sort of affirming that. So is this just dead on arrival for executive orders for Trump where birthright citizenship is concerned?
I don't think so. I think this is going to be a bit of a longer process. I think the Trump administration has committed to appealing any of the decisions that come down this week, and has said that they're unsurprised that these particular judges have decided in this way. I think this is going to be a longer fight, and I think there's going to be a real constitutional question here as to whether birthright citizenship should be read to include people that are born here or not born here, or parents that are born here or not born here. I think this is going to be a much longer fight.
All right, so U.S. District Judge George O'Toole Jr. in Boston didn't express an opinion on the legality of that program. He scheduled a hearing for Monday at 2 p.m., we understand. He also directed administration officials to extend the deadline to apply for that program until after the hearing. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, sort of similarly, I think that a lot of the judiciary that is considering these issues wants more time to reflect, more time to research, to hear the arguments. I think there is an overwhelming amount of flurry of arguments on these recent executive orders, including this one, and I think that we'll probably hear more next week.
Okay, so let's put that aside and let's talk about this other piece of litigation, the lawsuit by the FBI to prevent the names of those working on those January 6th inquiries from being released. A lot of FBI agents saying, if you release our names, you're compromising us to the entire crime community, compromising the safety of our families even. Where is that lawsuit today?
Yeah, they're seeking a temporary restraining order. They are worried about their privacy. They're worried about their security. The plaintiffs in that particular case are FBI agents who said that their safety is at risk if their identities are known. They not only worked on the January 6th sort of issues, but they've worked on broader issues involving murders and narcotics and serious felony issues. So I think that there's a broader constitutional issue in terms of they were doing what they were asked to do in the capacity of their roles, and whether or not their identities can be disclosed now.
So on the other side of things, the Department of Justice is now suing the city of Chicago over their sanctuary city laws. We just heard ICE of Denver talk about the difficulty of doing what they want to do in a so-called sanctuary city. Relative to that city, what's the argument here?
Yeah, the immigration battle is ongoing. I think this is probably a predicted step. There's been a lot of discussion about sanctuary cities, especially Chicago. There's been a ton of emphasis around these ICE crackdowns. Sanctuary cities have committed to not participate, to not use local law enforcement, to get involved with the federal efforts. And now the DOJ, I think, is really pushing back and calling their bluff as whether they will continue to receive federal funding if they will not participate in federal programs such as immigration crackdowns and things like this.
Do you see how New York did participate, and sort of a shock by a lot of people in the country that Mayor Eric Adams granted some participation? Do you think that weakens the case of Chicago?
I don't. I think that this basically boils down to that there are some cities that obviously have chosen with their electorate to not participate, and some that have. And the mayor of Chicago seems very committed to not changing Chicago away from being a sanctuary city, much like, obviously the mayor of New York has decided to move in a different direction. The question is whether federal funding can be attached to cities that decide not to participate in these immigration crackdowns that are going on right now.
Following the laws, the legalese, and the money. Robin, thank you so much. It's nice to talk to you on CBS News 24/7. So we want to get to this. Just moments ago, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt previewed the top agenda items for the president's meeting with those Republican lawmakers. Remember, Congress controls the purse strings, writes the checks. Now the president is having a meeting with them. Here's what she had to say about that meeting.
These are the tax priorities of the Trump administration that the president has laid out for members in that meeting today. No tax on tips, which is obviously a very public campaign promise that the president made. No tax on seniors' Social Security. No tax on overtime pay. Renewing President Trump's 2017 middle-class tax cuts. Again, these are the president's priorities. Adjusting the SALT cap, eliminate all the special tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners, close the carried interest tax deduction loophole, tax cuts for Made in America products. This will be the largest tax cut in history for middle-class working Americans. The president is committed to working with Congress to get this done.
All right, so there you have it. Those are the priorities that were laid out there by the press secretary. We'll continue to follow that and see what happens when they come out of those meetings. Meanwhile, herds of dairy cattle in Nevada just tested positive for bird flu. Cattle, bird flu. U.S. officials confirm this marks the second strain of bird flu to spread now to cows. This specific strain, called D1.1, is the same strain behind the fatal human case in Louisiana last year, so scientists are really zeroing in on it. They say this time the cows caught the flu from wild birds, and that's a sign the virus could be here to stay. A lot to talk about here, so let's go live to CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez. You are live in Nye County, Nevada, not far from Clark County, just right outside of Las Vegas there. Do we know if these dairy cows could potentially pass the virus on to humans? So we know bird to cow, can it go cow to human?
Well, it certainly can. There have been 67 people that have been infected thus far with bird flu who have come in direct contact with these dairy cattle. The bird flu to dairy cattle, not new, has been spreading since last spring. Over 900 herds across the country have been affected. Here in Nevada, the first herd was detected in Nye County back in December, and then another batch of testing then discovered that this new strain of bird flu was detected in Churchill County, which is neighboring Nye County. Most of the folks that have been infected have been individuals who have come in contact with those cows, so farm workers. It could be, they have said that anyone who comes in contact with raw milk can also get infected. But most of them have been presenting symptoms of pink eye whenever that, whenever perhaps the raw milk ends up squirting into their eye. But they are cautioning and telling folks to make sure they wear PPE, so face shields, masks, gloves, when they're coming into contact with these dairy cattle.
Wow. Okay. So scientists are starting to signal, Andres, that bird flu might be here to stay. So why are scientists landing on that this definitively this early?
Well, it's definitely just showing that just like any other virus, this will be mutated. So this is another variant of the bird flu at this point that they have detected here in Nevada. They're trying to figure out whether it was spread from cow to cow, this particular strain, or if it was a bird that landed on these cows, and if that was a spread. So they're trying to zero in exactly on how this mutation occurred. But like any other virus, another variation did come about.
Reporting live with those beautiful red rocks of Nevada behind him. I know those well. Andres Gutierrez, thank you so much. All right, when we come back, there's a lot of talk about Elon Musk's team digging into the FAA technology in the wake of that deadly crash between an airliner and a military helicopter. We're watching what is being said there from Elon Musk and any changes that could be reported to you when we come back. Well, look at this. Some tense moments for passengers in Seattle after a Japan Airlines jet clipped the tail of a parked Delta plane. Look at that. Officials say the Delta plane was waiting to be de-iced yesterday morning when this happened. Nobody got hurt. But let's take a closer look at the damage of that airline's jet out of Japan. You can see a piece missing right there from the tip of its wing right after it struck the tail of that Delta plane. You wouldn't want to be getting on that plane if you're a passenger, right? Let's now talk about another transportation story to D.C. now, where investigators have identified all 67 victims of last week's tragic and deadly crash between an American Airlines jet and a Black Hawk helicopter. So crews have offloaded most of the plane's wreckage. They pulled it out of the icy Potomac River. You can see it right there being pulled up onto a barge. It's taken to a secure location. Today and tomorrow's focus is really getting the last portion of the plane's wing and the helicopter out of the water for analysis. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve joins us now. You're on the stream with us. And Chris, I don't think you've had a break in days, my friend, with all of these transportation headlines. Specific to the D.C. case, what happens once they get those parts all out and get them to a hangar for analysis?
Well, it allows the NTSB to be able to get hands-on work amongst the wreckage. The NTSB has said they feel like they need access to the Black Hawk helicopter, for example, to better understand some of the data set that came out of that helicopter's black boxes. They also, want to look at things like switches and dial positions, the configuration of the cockpits of both aircraft. So they need to be able to access them to do that kind of hands-on work. They also have an exemplar airplane, a CRJ 700, on site there so that they can compare things from the wreckage to another aircraft. And that stuff just has to get done once it's out of the water.
All right, so I got to get your take on something that's happening right now. Officials with the National Transportation Safety Board reportedly and the FAA are briefing senators on their investigation. I want to play some of the sound that Senator Ted Cruz had. He spoke briefly about news that Elon Musk could now have some control over the FAA. Let's listen to that and we'll get your take.
I think that's actually tremendously important. I have been advocating for a long time modernization of air traffic control. Our air traffic control technology is from the 1950s. We are literally using radar and strips of paper and floppy disks. And the fact that Elon Musk, one of the top technology CEOs on planet Earth, is available to bring his expertise and the expertise of world-class engineers to bring air traffic control out of the 1950s and into the 21st century, I think that is a real opportunity.
Yeah, it sort of echoes what we heard the president say earlier in the day, in fact, even talking about using satellite technology. Break this down for us. What would this mean?
Well, there's widespread agreement that the air traffic control system is old and that technological upgrades are needed. The question about whether Elon Musk should be the person to do it will be a controversial one. Remember, he is a user of the airspace with SpaceX, and there's some reporting that he pushed very hard to have the FAA administrator, the former now FAA administrator, pushed out of that role. So we've already heard from the ranking member on the Senate Commerce Committee, who works across the dais from Ted Cruz, Senator Cantwell, say she doesn't want Elon Musk involved because she thinks it's a conflict of interest, given that he owns SpaceX, who is a user of the airspace and is regulated in part by the FAA. So, there may be some controversy around having Elon Musk involved. The flip side of that, as you heard Senator Cruz say, he is one of the leading tech minds, and there is no question that the technology in the air traffic control towers right now is outdated. When you're hearing that air traffic controllers get information about an aircraft position rounded to the nearest 100 feet, when, there's an app on my phone that can give me data down to the foot, that's a stark difference in technology that clearly that needs to be addressed. And there does appear to be a will to address it. The question is, should Elon Musk be the guy to do it? And if he is, what kind of role does he have? Is he going to be a tech consultant? Is he the government's Accenture or Deloitte that's going to make suggestions, or is he going to go into the FAA and sort of take over? That's what we don't know about what his role may be.
CBS News transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve, invaluable information and a lot of headlines. Thank you so much, my friend. So when we come back, we've got some breaking news on legal challenges to Donald Trump's executive orders on birthright citizenship and the ticking clock for federal workers who were facing that decision to accept a buyout today or else. Much more when we come back. Keeping our breaking news promise to you here on CBS News 24/7, two new developments in two lawsuits against the Trump administration. So let's break it down. First, a second federal judge temporarily blocked President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. That second judge saying birthright citizenship is a fundamental constitutional right. Now let's talk about the other. This second one, it's a judicial block to a Trump plan offering incentives for federal workers to resign. Now, this ruling came just hours before the deadline to apply for that deferred resignation program. It's something we talked about off the top of this broadcast. So while we've been on air, the judge scheduled a hearing for Monday and directed administration officials to extend the deadline to apply until after that hearing. We'll be watching this one closely. Let's talk about the weather. California cannot catch a break. Look at this. Live on our monitors, downtown San Francisco. Another atmospheric river moves in. Just think about a big river over your head, and that's Grace Cathedral, bottom left-hand corner, if you don't know San Francisco, and it's getting soaked. A lot of communities north of the city, up closer to wine country, well, they saw tragedies, flooding, evacuations, homes destroyed. In fact, a rain record for San Francisco in the Bay, not seen since 1887. Let's jump north over the Golden Gate Bridge and show you those impacts there. Mudslides north of San Francisco, and look at that. Homes damaged, more debris flows. A lot of first responders very concerned that the ground that they are on to rescue people could actually give way. And it's tragic because we do have some follow-up out of Sonoma County. Sheriff's Department there says 2 people died as a result of those storms in Santa Rosa. That's why people are watching. Zoe Mintz and all of the forecasters in California needing to know if they need to be on the run from flood or fire.
Well, luckily for the Bay Area today, it's going to be significantly less excessive of rainfall in Southern California that all eyes are on, as over the next 24 hours, the entirety of the state of California will be getting some rain, a lot of mountain snow, but Southern California, Los Angeles, that was dealing with wildfire threats just a couple of weeks ago, now going to be dealing with flash flooding threats on top of those burn scars. We are going to be seeing, again, winter weather advisories all across California and up across the northern parts of the United States, and winter storm warnings. An additional 1 to 3 feet of snow is likely. But what you cannot see on the map below me, or at least what you couldn't see, was the winds. The wind advisories that are in effect all across California and up into Nevada. We are going to continue to see 50 to 60 plus mile an hour wind gust, along with that chance for quite a lot of rain. So all things to keep in mind with already saturated soils and gusty winds down to trees, tree limbs, power outages, all things that we are going to keep a very close eye on, Reed, over the next several days as Southern California burn scar flash flooding the Bay Area down to tree limbs and power outages.
Yeah, this palm tree is looking downright balmy by comparison. Okay, thank you, Zoe. So Super Bowl Sunday might just be the detour that you need. It's 3 days away. New Orleans is hosting the heavyweight battle between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. But as CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca reports, security, it's top of mind for the city. Watch.
Fans traveling down for the game will notice a massive security presence in New Orleans. Not just equipment like barriers like this one, but also a small army of law enforcement. In total, we're anticipating just over 2,000 officers, including members of the National Guard, Customs and Border Protection, as well as state and local police officers. And their coverage will be on the ground and in the sky. We got to see the same bird's eye view that CBP officials will have flying over the Superdome, where hundreds of officers will also be patrolling. Now, on the ground, mobile Archer barriers are installed in high traffic areas, and this comes after 14 people were killed on New Year's after a man sped through a crowd on Bourbon Street. CBS News has learned the bollards temporarily installed by the city would only stop a car going 10 miles per hour. And I spoke with Bill Braden, a former NYPD police commissioner and a New Orleans anti-terror advisor. Here's what he had to say. Talk about some of the equipment here. Is this deterrence or defense?
Actually both. Deterrent in the sense of somebody thinking about getting in here. They see this and may think twice about, okay, let me go up a couple of blocks, see if I can get in that way. Defense, it works very well. This effectively would stop the vehicle that was involved in the January 1st incident, would have been basically stopped by this barrier.
Braden and his team are working with the New Orleans Police Department to come up with a security plan, obviously to not only keep the crowd safe for Super Bowl, but also for future events like Mardi Gras. Back to you.
Thanks. Following a stunning 5-win night at the Grammys, Kendrick Lamar sat down with Apple Music to discuss his highly anticipated Super halftime show.
For me, it means everything because it puts the culture on the forefront where it needs to be and not minimized to just a catchy song or verse. This is a true art form. So to represent it on this type of stage is like everything that I've worked for and everything that I believe in as far as the culture. Like, I live and die by it.
Well, he'll bring the music, we'll bring the chips and guac. You to let us know who you want to win. Thank you so much for watching. That's CBS News 24/7. The news continues.